Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.Rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.Rent. This is Tanner Wayland, and I'm excited to talk with you today about something that we're very passionate about, improvement, specifically in terms of DMing for your players, so that we can provide the best adventures and games that we can. So, we talk a lot about improvement and specifically reflecting on how sessions have gone, right? We've talked about how, hey, after a session, contact each of your players and find out, how are they feeling? Did they enjoy the game? Is there anything that you could improve? We've covered that before, right? One thing we haven't really covered is the importance of self-reflection. You reflecting on something yourself and just thinking, hey, how did that session go? And I'm not talking about, once the last player has left, you kind of just internally thinking, oh man, that session kind of sucked. Or opposite, you could be thinking, hey, that was a pretty good session. I think I did pretty good. Because if that's the extent of your self-reflection, then you're missing out on something, right? You're missing out on a lot of growth opportunity and realization that would help you grow a lot as a DM. And so that's why we think it's so important. But to get into a little bit more of what I mean with this, it could look like this. Your last player leaves, or they get off of the online video chat. You put away the D&D minis, the DM screen, your laptop, anything else you were using, and everything's quiet for a second. Now, at this point, you typically have a few options. First, you leave, you do something else, play a video game, watch TV, go to bed, whatever it is, right? That's a pretty common option. You want to relax after a session. Another option is you get so excited with how the session was going that you're like, hey, I want to start planning the next session immediately. And you start planning out encounters and the NPCs that the players will interact with, and you just get really excited. The third option, and this is what we really want to advocate for, is for you to pause, to think about, hey, I have, the experience of going through the session fresh in my mind. Let's open up a Word doc or pull out a notebook and write our thoughts about what went on as a DM. Now you're going to ask yourself some specific questions, but before we get to those, why is that third option better than the other two? Just doing something else or planning for the next session. Unlike those two things, self-reflection and just thinking about what you did is the only one of those three options that actively is understanding what you as a DM do when you're DMing, and then makes plans based off of that, right? Because planning for the next session, that's not the same as realizing where you messed up in the last session. Does that make sense? Basically, what I'm saying is that, just pressing forward and being like, hey, I'll get better with time. You will get better with time, but that doesn't guarantee that you'll recognize how or get better at a fast enough rate to where you can become a really effective DM. I think there's some people who feel so rushed in their session planning that they never, slow down to be like, hey, yeah, I need to plan all these encounters, but am I making these encounters effective to begin with, right? And so with that being said, if you slow down and you take a second, and it doesn't have to take long. It could take, 5-15 minutes, and it would make everything so much better and more clear in terms of what your goals for improvement should be. I think it's important that you also write out your thoughts, because I keep saying self-reflection, and some of you might be thinking mindfulness or a meditation, and those are aspects of it. But in terms of self-reflection that leads to change, I find that writing it down helps. I've journaled off and on since I was a kid, and I've just found that it provides so much clarity in terms of like how my day to day went. I get to think about like, hey, was it good? How did I contribute to that? Or it just provides a wider viewpoint, a further back view, like point of view of my day. And that's exactly what, some form of journaling or writing could do when you are reflecting on your session. So let's say that you just finish the session and you're like, hey, I'm going to do that third option. I'm going to sit down, before I go talk with my wife or do whatever, right? I'm just going to write out some thoughts. What are some of the things that you might want to answer? First, I would say the most important question is just a general vibe. Like, how did you feel about the session and why? If you write out those questions, that the answer to that question, whether it's like, oh, good, bad, then when you have to explain why, it'll provide a nice overview. And then you can get a little bit more in depth in the details. Like for example, you'd be like, okay, were there any parts that felt like they took too long? Could be combat, could be a role-playing situation. If you look at that question, that's going to help you a lot, because as we've said this before, speed and timing and pace is a huge part of an adventure. And on the other end, it's like, were there any parts that I could have sped up, or slowed down, right? Sometimes you just rush through a setting description or a conversation, and it never pulls the characters in. It never really informs them of what they need for the next part in an effective way, right? Because you didn't slow down enough. Or you went too long on a conversation that could have been just 2 or 3 sentences, and the party could have kept going on their merry way, right? Another question worth asking is, was the role-playing a fun or immersive part of the session? As much as combat is so important to have ready and have everything planned, role-playing, it's just, you really need to think about how it must have felt for the players and how you felt. Like, I personally, I have the issue where I sometimes, a few of my NPCs come across as pretty much the same person. And I'm not alone in this. As much as, we each would like to believe that we can be flexible, sometimes our role-playing is a little bit lackluster, and asking yourself, hey, could I have done better? And how could I have done better? and could have been more immersive, that should just be a regular question you're asking yourself. Also ask about yourself about the combat. Did it go smoothly? Did I have the stat blocks prepared well enough? Were all the monsters acting kind of too samey? Because when you have a variety of monsters, you don't want the goblins acting the same as the wargs, right? You don't want the slimes to act the same as, the griffins or whatever it is. You want some differentiation, and you want the players to have opportunities to implement interesting tactics. And so asking that question will help you kind of think like, hey, I fall into this, this same rut, so to speak, and I could do a lot better. If you ask that question, then you're going to acknowledge that the ways you could get better. And then when you're planning for the next session, it's already going to be top of mind. So now you're going to ask some questions about your players. And this is before you've even talked with them, right? And I think that's important because before you talk with them and ask like, hey, what did you think? If you ask yourself what you thought of their experience, then it's going to help you take any of their feedback much better, because you'll have realized, oh, I fell short in this or this way, right? And so it kind of provides that humility before you then talk to your players afterwards and ask, hey, where could I improve? You're going to want to ask, like, did each player have an interesting experience, right? And did I leave any player out of the session? Or did it feel like they were just a background character? Because if you ask those questions, then you'll realize where your favoritism lies, or which players are kind of hogging the spotlight. So always ask those player-related questions. And then finally, ask yourself, if there was one thing I could change in the future to make the next session better, what would it be? It's kind of like making, if you've ever heard of the whole SMART goal process, where it needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, I think, rational or something, and then time bound or timely. This isn't exactly that, but if you ask yourself, hey, what is that one thing? Essentially, you're actually naming a goal, and you're not just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. So after you've gone through all those questions and kind of realized where things went well, where things could have gone better, then you're going to name a thing that you want to work on for next session. And of course, everything else you acknowledged is going to still be in your mind, and that's going to still help you. But at the very least, you've named one thing, which some weeks, when you're like, hey, I kind of crushed it. Then, even naming that one thing, that might be the only thing that you could improve in the next session, which, I mean, good on you. But by naming it, you give yourself a type of goal, and that'll help you follow through going forward. So those are just some examples of questions. You know what you do best as a DM. You also know where you kind of struggle. And so, if you find that you struggle in a certain way, like, oh, my NPCs aren't distinct enough, or my combats are kind of a slog, then add questions about those different parts of the game that you struggle with. And then, you'll be able to improve more quickly with those. So I encourage you all to get out there and really implement this after your next session. And if you're worried about the time, honestly, just take 5 minutes. It makes a world of difference. And I really hope that you start to see that difference going forward. Until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.Rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to Monsters.Rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
We also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action,
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
drama,
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
and stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.